already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Oh, I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
afternoon, this is Mark Dolan in for Martin Daubney and a very busy 3 hours to come. Before 4 o'clock, Robert Jenrick officially launches his bid for the leadership of the Tory party. We will bring you the speech live. In what looks to be Sir Keir Starmer's first major political headache, is the country bracing itself for a summer of chaotic political violence? How will our new Prime Minister tackle Britain's increasingly divided and angry society? And the bad headlines keep on coming for the BBC following the Huw Edwards scandal. We'll have a look at the damage done to our national state broadcaster. Will it make the public more reluctant to pay the licence fee? And Harry and Meghan are off on another world tour, but given the fact that they've kept their royal titles, do we really want them representing the UK? I'll be asking a top royal insider. All of that between now and 6. That Robert Jenrick speech, any second now, you'll get it live on the show. Interact with me all afternoon, gbnews.com/your say. But first, the news headlines and a good friend of mine, Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Home Office Minister Lord Hanson has told would-be rioters to be prepared to face the full force of the law if they choose to return to the streets this weekend. Several protests are due to take place over the coming days. At least 15 are reported to have been advertised online. The Muslim Council of Britain says hundreds of mosques across the country will be strengthening their security this weekend. Last night, announcing a new police unit to tackle violent disorder, the Prime Minister blamed a gang of thugs for a riot in Southport, which saw dozens of police officers injured in a clash with a crowd of men outside a mosque. The unrest came a day after 3 girls were killed in a knife attack in the town. 17-year-old Axel Radukabana has been charged with their murders. Meanwhile, police have identified a woman who was one of 8 people being sought after protesters threw objects at a demonstration outside a hotel housing migrants in Aldershot, which left 1 police officer injured. Hampshire Police said a minority of the 200 who protested outside the Potters International Hotel became involved in the disruption on Wednesday evening. The protest follows multiple instances of unrest across the country following the Southport stabbings. 3 US citizens freed in a Russian West prisoner swap are back on American soil. Evan Gershkovich was one of 16 prisoners swapped for 8 Russian prisoners in what has been described as the biggest exchange since the end of the Cold War between Russia and the West. Gershkovich was detained since March last year on charges of espionage, which he'd always denied. Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky's £3.5 billion takeover deal for the owner of Royal Mail has been called in by the UK government under security rules. International Distribution Services, the parent company of Royal Mail, agreed a takeover deal by Mr Kretinsky's group in May. It is understood the Cabinet Office has now launched a review process into that bid under the National Security and Investment Act. The process will assess whether the sale to Mr Kretinsky, who's also already the IDS's largest shareholder, could affect the UK's economic infrastructure or pose a security risk. Serial killer Levi Belfield has been blocked from having a civil partnership after a new law came into force stopping the most serious offenders getting married behind bars. Belfield is serving 2 whole life orders for killing 13-year-old Millie Dowler, Marsha McDonnell and Amelie Delagrange, as well as the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy. It is understood he'd recently submitted an application for a civil partnership, which is believed to have spurred the government on to bring in the restrictions. The government minister in charge of sport says she will be speaking with the sporting bodies about inclusion, fairness and safety after what she described as an incredibly uncomfortable watch when asked about the Olympic boxing gender row. Italian fighter Angela Carini abandoned her bout against Algeria's Iman Khalif after 46 seconds, saying she'd never felt a punch like this. Khalif is one of 2 fighters present at this year's Games, having been disqualified from the World Championships last year by the International Boxing Association for failing to meet gender eligibility criteria. But Lisa Nandy said the biological facts are far more complicated than is being presented on social media. Great Britain sits third in the Olympics medals table after GB's Scott Brash, Harry Charles and Ben Maher won gold in the jumping team final in Paris. Earlier, Great Britain's Bryony Page won a gold medal in the women's trampoline at the Games. 33-year-old won silver in Rio, bronze in Tokyo and now gold in Paris. She's the European champion, the world champion and now the Olympic champion. And earlier today, Great Britain's Emily Craig and Imogen Grant won the gold medal in the women's lightweight double sculls at the Paris Olympics. The pair missed out on a medal in Tokyo 4 years ago by just 0.01 seconds. The event will be taken out of the rowing programme after the Paris Olympics, with beach sprints introduced in their place in Los Angeles in 4 years' time. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Sam has your next headlines.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Mark Dolan in for Martin Daubney. Good to have your company. A very busy 3 hours to come. We're just watching Robert Jenrick, his first major speech as he throws his hat into the ring for the Tory leadership. We will bring you the speech live. He is a man, he's a hopeful, and he thinks that he can unite the Conservative Party and make them electable again. So we're keeping an eye on that. We'll get straight to it when he reaches the stage. But first, we start with fears of more violence this weekend after the riots following the killings of 3 young girls in Southport on Monday. There have been clashes in towns and cities across England, with more than 100 people arrested in London on Wednesday. 3 men alleged to have taken part. OK, folks, let me interrupt that because I can tell you that Robert Jenrick is approaching the stage. This is his first major hustings speech in his bid to be the next Conservative leader.
Hi. Thank you. Well, thank you, Esther. That was absolutely brilliant. It's wonderful to have you here, and thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming here from right across our country. But can I begin with this? By addressing those of you, my friends, my neighbours, my constituents here in Newark. Some of you I last saw on election day when we were pounding those pavements. Thank you for everything that you did. Thank you for knocking on all those doors, for having those conversations. Thank you for posting those leaflets through letterboxes so beautifully. As a result of everything that you did, we defeated Labour. We squeezed reform. We defied the polls, the odds, the national tide, and we won here in Newark. And so it is fitting that I am here today in the town and with the people to whom I owe so much to launch my campaign to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And I've spent my whole life here in the Midlands, living in small towns like Newark. And these places and these people like you, like me, have shaped my politics. People in Newark are hard-working. They are doers. They are makers. They are people who get up early in the morning to earn a living. They are proud of our history. They would never denigrate our country. They treasure family and do everything in their power to look after their children and give them the best possible start in life. They embody the best values of our country. I'm in politics for that, for them, for you. It's why, as I wrote last month, in response to those people who said that we should cut out the members of our party in this process of choosing the next leader of the Conservative Party, that no, we should never do that. I want to breathe new life into our party with a new spirit in which we respect the role of the membership of this party. And we'll do that in many ways. We'll do it, for example, by ensuring that it is members who choose candidates for elections once again. I want to grow this party. I want to become a mass membership organisation once again, with new members of all ages and in every part of our country. And I know we can do it. In 2010, the Conservative Party won young people. And I firmly believe, that with the right approach, we can persuade young people again that it is in their interests to be Conservatives. You know, there are too many young people today for whom the dream of home ownership feels out of reach. They're sat at home in their childhood bedrooms, waiting to get on in life, waiting for their lives to begin. And we Conservatives have to change that. That is one of the reasons why I'm so proud to look around this room today and to see so many young Conservatives here for a reason, because they are backing this campaign. Now, we need to get the machine of the Conservative Party back into fighting shape, because it let too many people down, members and candidates, at the last general election. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say and to pay tribute to those Conservative MPs who fought at the last election, who lost their seats due to no fault of their own, decent public servants who worked for years to support their communities. We must never let this happen again. We must be better. We can be better. Now, we've got elections coming up. There will be local elections next year. Then there will be Scottish and Welsh elections. Even the general election is only a matter of years away. We've got to get this party back together. That is why we're here today, to get the party back together and to get going again. I know we can do it. But let's not be too downbeat. It's only a few weeks into this new Labour government, and already the hard left of the Labour Party have got it in for Sir Keir Starmer. There's a cabal of rebel Labour MPs and independents who are already gunning for Sir Keir. And of course, amongst them is one MP for Islington, who is publicly seething that Sir Keir has waltzed into number 10 without giving them so much as a thought. But let's not waste too much time worrying about poor Emily Thornberry. But seriously, in this campaign, I am going to tell you some hard truths. But let me begin with this. This is a great country with a proud history. When we came into office 13 years ago, the Labour Party had left this country's public finances in the worst possible state. And we turned them around, thanks to the decisions taken by David Cameron. We reformed our schools such that today our children are the most literate and the most numerate in the Western world. We empowered head teachers against huge bureaucratic resistance to take the decisions that were necessary to put the interests of their students first. We created free schools, and I founded one myself here in Newark. And despite the backing of Sir Keir Starmer, we ensured that Jeremy Corbyn, a threat to our prosperity and national security, was never Prime Minister of this country. We stood by brave Ukraine in their hour of greatest need. We did that as Conservatives. And we did more than that. Thanks to Boris Johnson, despite all the opposition and the paralysis, we got Brexit done. Now all of this begs a big question. How is it that we have just suffered our worst ever electoral defeat? And to answer that question, we do need to confront some hard truths. There's many reasons, but the principal one, the primary one, is that we broke our promise to the British public to deliver controlled and reduced migration, and the secure border that the public rightly demand. We allowed the cycle of broken promises to continue. And as a minister, when I concluded that I couldn't secure any more changes to our legal migration system, I resigned from Cabinet last year, because I, for one, was not willing to be just another minister who makes and breaks promises on immigration. But it was about more than just that. Let's acknowledge that today. In 2019, we also promised a strong economy and NHS. But growth was too low, and taxes were too high, and we lost our hard-won reputation for sound financial management. And we must never do that again. We promised to level up, and we got started on that generational mission, aided by great Conservative mayors like Andy Street and Ben Houchen. But we were knocked off course by the pandemic and by global economic crises. But I believe, more passionately than ever, that talent is spread evenly across our great country, but opportunity is not, and we must return to that agenda. And critically, despite spending more money than ever before, too much of the British state simply wasn't working. Nowhere exemplifies this challenge more than the NHS. We are spending 20% more money. There are 20% more doctors and nurses in the NHS than there were 5 years ago. And yet we are treating no more patients. We've poured cash into the black hole of waste and inefficiency. We allowed new quangos to arise. We allowed poor management to go unpunished. We saw some of the structural flaws in the system ourselves. But out of fear of our opponents mischaracterizing our efforts, we shirked the difficult decisions. We allowed the lions on the front line of the NHS to be let down by the donkeys in the back offices. Above all, we forgot that the NHS is a public service, not a religion. So if we are in office again, if we re-enter government, we must never make those choices again. We must never shirk the difficult decisions. We must never jump at our own shadows. We must invest in the NHS, but we must ensure it works for the British people. Now, Labour say all these problems are the fault of the Tories. Of course they're not. They're definitely not. These challenges didn't arise in 2010, and they're not going to magically disappear in 2024. The roots of these problems are not red or blue. These are challenges faced by most countries across the West. Their roots are in geopolitics, in new technology, in the battle of ideologies. But one thing I do firmly believe is this: the particular problems we face as a country stem from the fact that the British system is not working for the British people. And I'm not going to lie to you. For most of my time as a politician, I believed our political system basically worked. I was elected 10 years ago in a by-election here in Newark. I was honoured to be a member of the government of each of the last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers. I prided myself on making the system work, on getting things done for my constituents and our country. I was the Housing Secretary who, along with Esther McVeigh, ensured that the number of new homes being built in our country was the highest level for 40 years. We slashed red tape on small businesses. We got investment again. on our high streets and in left-behind communities the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. I created the world's most admired homelessness programme to try to eliminate rough sleeping. But in the last 2 years, I have come to see that a different approach is needed. As Community Secretary during the pandemic, I saw the British state was both overbearing and powerless. As Housing Secretary, I saw that we had a planning system that meant that we couldn't get the critical infrastructure in energy or transport built, even if it was overwhelmingly in the national interest to do so. And at the Home Office, I saw more strongly than ever what was going wrong in our country. I saw that the British state was either unwilling or unable to perform its most basic duty, to secure our borders and to keep the British people safe. As Minister for Immigration, I saw dangerous people coming into our country and the state unable to deport them. I saw the British state finding it difficult to build united and cohesive communities. I saw intercommunal violence, extremism. I saw challenges of diminishing public trust. I saw an economic model that was fundamentally failing, whereby imported foreign labour was leading to immense pressures on our housing, on public services that our constituents wanted, like access to GPs and dentists. And I saw British workers' wages being undercut. Look, if mass migration was rocket fuel for our economy, we would have just lived through the greatest age of economic growth. But we haven't. And too many intelligent people refused to say it like it was. Too many economists were more worried about GDP than GDP per capita. Now, I fought relentlessly for the solutions to these problems, solutions that most people agree with. And yet our political system was either unwilling or unable to effect the change that our country needs. And in the end, I concluded this, that the system that I had been part of, that I had upheld, was completely broken and was contributing to our national decline. Now, Labour are in power. They have the landslide that is necessary to effect the radical changes that our country needs. But it's not going to happen. They have too many delusions. If anyone tells you that the grown-ups are in charge, just look at Ed Miliband. Even in the last couple of weeks, as you just heard from Esther, Labour have been dishonest. They've lied about the state of our public finances. They've begun to break their promises made to you, the British public, not to raise your taxes. They've declined to set a timetable to increase defence spending. They've created housing targets whereby we build less in our cities, precisely the places where homes are needed the most and the greatest productivity benefits could be achieved. They've released thousands of dangerous criminals from our prisons. And on the altar of net zero, they've compromised hundreds of thousands of jobs in our oil and gas industry. And already, the starting pistol has been fired by the far left of the Labour Party. They are gunning for Keir Starmer. And these people, remember, these are people who despise the West, who disdain British culture and history. These are people who deny basic biology and common sense, and who dogmatically oppose everything that we Conservatives hold dear: opportunity, freedom, self-reliance, free enterprise. It's for all those reasons and more that our party remains our country's best hope. But our party has to change. We have to acknowledge that. It's got to change. The shape of that change and the principles and values that we must stand for are already becoming clear. I believe that the British people and legally, you should be detained and removed within days. I believe that we should be building more prisons and that we should be locking up more serial offenders, not releasing people. I believe that we can and we must make our economy grow faster. And unlike Labour, we do this by building more homes in our cities. We do it by having more reliable, cheap energy produced in the UK. And we do that by reducing subsidies for offshore wind and investing in new nuclear. I believe that we give our people better skills, real skills, not low-value degrees. And whilst I believe in a safety net, there are too many people on welfare in our country, and we need to give them the dignity that comes with work. I believe are growing stronger, and we must respond to that. We respond to that by investing more in our armed forces, by investing at least 3% of GDP in defence, and doing so more intelligently than we have in the past. Above all, as a Conservative to my core, I believe this. I believe in a small state that works, not a big state that fails. Now, friends, our victory here in Newark a few weeks ago tells us a lesson. Each of those MRP polls that said we were going to lose, all the pundits and the commentators who said it was impossible to win here, they were wrong. They got it wrong. We won. And those same pundits, those same pollsters and talking heads down in Westminster, they now say that our party cannot win again. They say that our problems are too intractable. They say we're too divided. They say that Keir Starmer is destined to be our nation's Prime Minister for a decade or more. Well, if there's one lesson of our success here in Newark, it's this. Nothing in politics is certain. Just as there are no final victories, there are no final defeats. And each and every one of you is testament to that. Those of you who helped in my campaign, who put their heart and soul into it, who fought for this community, for our party, for our nation, knows to your core that we can do this. So enough of defeatism. We can win. And just as it would be wrong to have the drag anchor of defeatism, so we must also be grounded in realism. And we all know in our hearts that we have a mountain to climb. We lost millions of votes. We lost millions of votes on the left to the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. We lost millions on the right to Reform. Trust, hard won, is easily lost. And it takes time. It takes energy, it takes commitment to win it back. But we must do that. Our party has to change a lot. Otherwise, there is no future for us. If we do change, let's change in keeping with our best traditions and values, which include generosity of spirit, respect for institutions and one another, a preference, a desire, a deep yearning for national unity, not division. We can ensure that those best traditions endure. And if we do change, if we listen to the British people, if we show that we have listened, if we show that we understand that we made mistakes and we've learnt from those mistakes, if we show that we understand the challenges facing our country, and that uniquely we have the serious answers and the serious leadership to stand up to them. If we show that we are united again, as a broad church, but a broad church with a common creed. If above all else we show that we have changed, then we can win again. And we can and will win again. Not in 10 years, not in 2 terms, but we can win the next general election. That, my friends, is why I am standing to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, to change our party, to win the next general election, and to secure the future of our country. Change, win, deliver for the people of Great Britain. I would be honoured if you would come with me on that journey. I would be honoured if you would join my campaign. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Robert Jenrick launching his bid for the Tory leadership with a clear message: a small state that works, not a big state that fails. He said the Conservative Party must change a lot or it has no future. His argument, here you go, we've got some questions now, expecting GB News to put the questions in.
We've got some questions from the media. And so I think the first one is from my good friend Chris at GB News. Chris, welcome to Newark.
Thank you. Well, asking to hear Jenrick. Chris Hope from GB News, great to be here. You want to remove illegal migrants within days. How do you do that? Would you bring back a better Rwanda scheme? And yes or no, would you pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights? And just a question about the current news in Southport and elsewhere. Is Sir Keir Starmer right to blame the far right for the troubles across England? Or did he miss an opportunity to understand why that's happening?
Yeah, well, thanks, Chris. And I know that you are an avid reader of my columns and my speeches, and so you will know that I have been saying things on the ECHR for a very long time, and my position is crystal clear on that one. On Southport, let me say this. I'm a father of 3 young daughters, and this was the most horrific crime. And like I'm sure everybody in this room, my thoughts and prayers are with those victims and their parents right now. I think that there is an important lesson from this, which is in this incident and in others across the country. They are revealing that there is too much disrespect for our police and for law and order. And I want to back the police. I want to ensure that they can take the robust action they need against these individuals and against people like them in all of the incidents we've seen in recent months right across the country. Because I do not want to live in a country where incidents like this, where disturbances are happening ever again. On the ECHR?
Yes or no? Would you leave?
Well, I think I've said that many times, absolutely. Yes, now the next question we've got is from Aggie LBC.
Well, there you have it. He's no Martin Luther King, but Robert Jenrick does have a clear vision for the Conservative Party. He said the party has got to change a lot or it has no future. He said they lost the election because of a cycle of broken promises. He wants to break that cycle. He criticised Labour for sacrificing jobs at the altar of net zero, and he talked about the threat of the hard left on Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. He said the roots of Britain's problems are not only red and blue, but that the Conservatives have the answer if they can unite. And he was pretty harsh about the NHS. He said that there are 20% more doctors and nurses than there were 5 years ago, but no more patients being treated. He talked about quangos, and he talked about donkeys in back offices in an almost Johnsonian lyrical flair. Well, there you go. First hat in the ring. That is Robert Jenrick. We're going to bring a reaction. Is he the man to unite the Tories and make them electable again? We'll get to that shortly. But first, the latest on the shamed former BBC presenter Huw Edwards. And the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has said that Huw Edwards should return his BBC salary of almost £500,000 after he admitted accessing indecent images of children. Meanwhile, a mural of Edwards that was close to Llanelli has been removed. Let's get reaction now from someone that knows the inner workings of the BBC very well. The BBC's former head of religion and ethics, Huw Ahmed. Huw, we haven't spoken since this story broke. Your reaction?
Well, of course, I'm speaking in a purely personal capacity here now, Mark, but I just think that it's such a shame. I mean, it's such a mess, isn't it? I mean, I hope the things that have come out in the last few days, etc., paint a picture of Huw that many of us had no idea about.
Yeah.
And actually, it's such a difficult thing to have to deal with when you've worked with somebody, as I did as well, and you had no idea, you know? And actually, what this has shown is actually the whole thing's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And I'm not saying the BBC have been perfect, but I don't know what else you can do when you're an employer of thousands of people. You have to treat everybody in the same particular way. And actually, you can't just go around sacking people. But I know probably within the hearts of the individuals involved, they'll be appalled about what they've had to endure, and probably and they'll be looking at Huw now in a completely different way. And I think, on an individual basis, they probably would like to strip him of as much as they can. But the fact of the matter is, I think, as Tim Davie has mentioned, sadly, the world doesn't work like that. And of course, now what you have to do is actually you have to live within the realms of kind of like law and the realms of kind of like employment law at that much as well. And what you're really looking at is whether or not you can ask Huw to do the decent thing. But actually what really matters now is what will happen in regards to the sentencing home as well. And I think the BBC probably will. I imagine, I've got no inside track on this, but I'd be shocked if they don't look in some form about trying to get some of that money back from when he was actually charged or when he was the investigation started. It's very difficult, you see, because until you're charged, you're innocent, right? When you're charged, then you have to prove yourself innocent in terms of there being a court case. But obviously there is no court case because he's pleaded guilty. So it's obviously it's a very difficult thing. It's not as if you can say the BBC covered this up. They weren't allowed to talk about things until the guy had been charged, and by then he'd left the BBC.
Now, Huw, of course, Huw Edwards was the face of BBC News. He presented the King's coronation, the Queen's funeral and election night coverage. So how damaging is this story to the long-term reputation of the BBC?
Well, the BBC is bigger than any individual who ever works there. I mean, but there's no getting away from this. Huw was a big face. I worked with Huw on a number of things, but the one big thing that I worked closely with him on was when the Pope came over to the UK. We were both integral to the delivery of the kind of like the big key pieces that the Pope did. And if you look at over the last 10 to 15 years or so, there'll be very few big items or big events that have happened where Huw's not being involved. So actually kind of like trying to erase him from that kind of legacy is quite difficult. Does it have a huge impact on the BBC in the long run? Probably not, because the BBC is, as I said, way bigger. And the average person understands that actually one individual doesn't reflect the whole organisation. But it's a tough time. It's one thing they won't definitely want. And with a new government as well, I think it's probably the last thing that Tim Davie wanted in terms of having a conversation with the minister.
Huw, good to see you again. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Huw Ahmed, former head of ethics and religion at both the BBC and at Channel 4. OK, next up, in what looks to be his first major political crisis, is Sir Keir Starmer bracing himself for a summer of violent political protest? We'll debate that next.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher, and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in Manchester. There's been an accident at junction 19 for Hayward. Queues on the M56 westbound in Cheshire. 2 lanes closed due to an earlier lorry fire just before junction 7 Bowden. Slow for the M40 northbound in Oxfordshire. It's all due to a vehicle needing a tyre change between junction 9 Bicester and 10 the Cherwell Valley services. Queuing traffic on the M4 westbound in both directions around Port Talbot at junction 40. There's a outside lane is closed near junction 41 Baglan westbound due to a collision. It's slow on the M4 Prince of Wales Bridge in both directions. There's roadworks and a contraflow in place, and queues to get to the M4 Prince of Wales Bridge for the M49 northbound towards junction 22. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Harry and Meghan's world tour resumes. More on that in just a moment. But first, more on the fears of violent disorder this weekend and potentially going into the summer. Let's speak to GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, after the scenes that we've seen over the last few days, this looks to be the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer's first major political headache.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. It is a major challenge for the government going forward if things continue to escalate. Now, we're very lucky as far as the authorities are concerned that last night there were no protests or disorder that were reported. So that is good. The concern, though, going forward is that at the weekend there are dozens of protests right across the country in pretty much every major city in England and Wales over the weekend. And there are counter-protests that are planned in at least half a dozen of those cities as well, with the group Stand Up to Racism and others who will be out. And that, of course, is a potential for an escalation in disorder, because anytime you have one group and then Stand Up to Racism come out as well and launch this counter-protest, it can always just raise feelings and charge the situation that bit more.
Mark, is it your view that the Prime Minister is right to point the finger at the far right, who have certainly agitated in the last few days and appear to have hijacked genuine public concern over Britain's divided society?
Sorry, I just lost you towards the end, but I think you asked about whether he was right to brand us as being violence that
Yes.
orchestrated and carried out by the far right. Well, I think without a doubt, I think there would have been far right elements within there. Whether they went as far as to orchestrate it in that sense, I don't know. But what is clear as well is that there were local people in and amongst these protests as well. They may have gone out to have a look. They may have gone because they felt very strongly about the issues, and some of them will have got caught up in potential disorder. Now, for instance, in Hartlepool, where we saw some quite significant disorder, 3 people were charged today. The addresses given for those 3 people were all in Hartlepool. And again, also the disorder that was reported in Manchester outside a migrant hotel, where a number of people were arrested. One person charged today with violent disorder and an assault on emergency service worker. His address was also in the Manchester area. So you've got the Prime Minister standing up in that news conference and saying very clearly that these are far-right groups who are travelling across the country to attend these events and cause violent disorder. Yet the people that we've seen so far, at least, being charged and appearing in court and their names and addresses coming out would suggest actually that they're from the local area.
Indeed, and of course, although this is just an incoming government, if we have a summer of chaos and violence on the streets, it won't be a good look for the new Prime Minister, and they'll be working hard to resist any perception that they've lost control already.
No, it's deeply challenging for any government, of course, and it was a Conservative government, a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government that was in office in 2011 following the death of Mark Duggan, who was shot dead by armed police, and that sparked riots in Tottenham in North London, which then spread to multiple locations across London and then countrywide over a number of days. That was a very challenging period of time, and there is real concern about the potential for the disorder we've seen spreading even further, and that's why we're seeing the police coming together with government to look at their plan of action should that happen.
Mark, will catch up later in the show. My thanks to GB News' home and security editor Mark White. Well, next up, Prince Harry has said that he won't bring his family to the United Kingdom over safety fears. But incredibly, he and Meghan are going to Colombia later this month. Make it make sense. We'll discuss that next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Huw Grant. Now, Huw Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good news, folks. Harry and Meghan are back. That is right. It's big royal news. We brought you the story last week that Harry won't bring his family to the United Kingdom over safety fears after the government downgraded his police protection. However, the couple are going to visit crime-ridden Colombia, which is infamous for its armed drug cartels. Both the UK and US governments advise their citizens against all but essential travel to parts of the country, and that's where Harry and Meghan are headed. Let's get reaction from GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, Britain's not safe, but Colombia is. Make it make sense.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I can go on about what the Foreign Office says about Colombia, and I'll quote, terrorists are very likely to try and carry out attacks in Colombia. Kidnapping rates remain very high. Illegal arms groups kidnap hostages, both for ransom and political purposes. Doesn't sound great, does it? You mentioned in your introduction there that the Foreign Office advises against all but essential travel to certain parts of the country. I can assure you Harry and Meghan are not going to those parts of the country. I'm told that they are going to get full police protection while they're in the country, is in Colombia. But as you say, Mark, only last week Prince Harry said he refuses to bring Meghan and his children to the UK because it's not safe. We don't have handguns in the United Kingdom. We haven't had them since 1996 and the Dunblane school shooting. But Colombia, more than half a century of armed internal conflict.
Well, that's right. No disrespect to the people of Colombia. It is a beautiful country with a great culture, but it's a dangerous country. What's behind this trip? Why are they back on the road following their trip to Nigeria?
Well, a couple of months ago, Harry and Meghan met a number of bereaved parents who unfortunately had lost their children to suicide, having been bullied online. And Colombia is hosting a big conference later this year about online safety and kind of being against violence against children. So that's what they're championing. It coincides with an interview they're doing on Sunday with a company in America as well. Their first joint interview since Oprah, actually, but they're talking about online safety and online trolling and all the rest of it. So that's the purpose.
So they're not talking about themselves for a change?
They're not talking about themselves, no. The Vice President, Francia Marquez, she has invited them, so it's an officially government-sanctioned visit. She's the first Afro-Colombian Vice President of the country, so she's mixed heritage, and so is Meghan. She's a Minister of Equality, Equity and an environmental activist. Environment, of course, something Harry and Meghan champions. You can see why the two of them might fit.
Most definitely. How will news of this royal tour go down in Buckingham Palace?
Well, I think it might ruffle a few feathers, you know, because the King and Prince and Princess of Wales have not been able to go on any tours recently because of the King's cancer diagnosis, the Princess of Wales' cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
Harry and Meghan have not only been to Nigeria recently, but now, of course, they're going to Colombia at some point later this year. And you know, because they haven't been, we've got the King and the Queen going to Australia later this year. But is it going to be a risk of overshadowing? And that's what they've got to grapple with.
And of course they are Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which means they do sort of represent us. How do you feel about that? gbnews.com/your say. My thanks to Cameron Walker. We'll catch up soon, Cameron. A very busy hour to come. More reaction to Robert Jenrick's speech. He thinks he can save the Conservative Party and make them great again. Also, Sir Keir Starmer, his first major political headache. A possible weekend and summer of political violence. It's a big headache for the new Prime Minister and for this new Labour government. Can he get on top of law and order? Also, we'll have a look at that ongoing row about the boxing, the women's boxing at the Olympics. It's a story that won't go away, alongside, of course, the Huw Edwards scandal at the BBC. So a busy 2 hours to come. Don't go anywhere. First up, here is your weather and Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Long delays on the M62 eastbound in Manchester. 2 lanes closed for an accident at junction 19 for Hayward. Queues on the M56 westbound in Cheshire. The entry slip road is closed and 2 lanes are closed for nearly a lorry fire at junction 7 for Bowden. Slow for the M40 northbound in Oxfordshire. It's all due to a vehicle earlier needing a tyre change between junction 9 Bicester and 10 the Cherwell Valley services. Queue in traffic on the M4 in both directions around junction 40 for Port Talbot. On the westbound stretch near Baglan at junction 41, the outside lane is closed for a collision. It's slow for the M4 Prince of Wales Bridge in both directions. There's a roadworks and a contraflow system in place, and it's slow to the bridge on the M49 northbound to junction 22. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GB News.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Mark Dolan, in for Martin Daubney. A very busy 2 hours to come. Is Sir Keir Starmer right to call out the trouble that we've seen in Southport and elsewhere this week as far right? Or is that just giving him political cover for a wider problem within UK society? And do we have to brace ourselves for a chaotic summer of political violence? Could this end Sir Keir Starmer's rather short-lived political honeymoon? We'll debate that in what looks to be our Prime Minister's first major crisis shortly. Also this afternoon, Robert Jenrick. Is he the man to make the Tories great again? Well, the former immigration minister has made that big claim as he says he vows to get the Conservatives back together and to end a cycle of broken promises. We can but hope. And the bad headlines keep on coming for the BBC following the Huw Edwards scandal. Is this a crisis of the corporation's own making? I'll be asking a leading industry figure shortly. And Harry and Meghan are off on another world tour. But given the fact that they've kept their royal titles, do we really want them representing the UK? I'll be asking a top royal insider. All of that to come before 6. And you can message me. Just go to gbnews.com/your say. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 4. The top story this afternoon. Police forces up and down the country a warning against violent disorder amid plans for more protests this weekend. It stemmed from rioting fuelled by misinformation following the deaths of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport on Monday. Home Office Minister Lord Hanson has told would-be rioters to be prepared to face the full force of the law if they choose to return to the streets again. Several protests are expected to take place over the coming days. At least 15 are reported to have been advertised online. Well, the Muslim Council of Britain says hundreds of mosques across the country will be strengthening their security this weekend. Meanwhile, police have identified a woman who was one of 8 people seen throwing objects outside a migrant hotel in Aldershot, leaving 1 police officer injured. Hampshire Police said a minority of the 200 people who protested outside the Potters International Hotel became involved in the disruption on Wednesday evening. That protest follows a number of riots across the country, as we said, following those Southport stabbings. Tory leadership candidate Robert Jenrick claims the Conservatives lost the election because of a broken promise on bringing down immigration. The former immigration minister was speaking at the launch of his campaign to succeed Rishi Sunak, one of 6 people hoping to win that leadership role. Mr Jenrick also claimed the British political system has appeared either unwilling or unable to secure the UK's borders.
Broke our promise to the British public to deliver controlled and reduced migration and the secure border that the public rightly demand. We allowed the cycle of broken promises to continue. And as a minister, when I concluded that I couldn't secure any more changes to our legal migration system, I resigned from Cabinet last year.
In other news, a mural of the former newsreader Huw Edwards in his home village in Carmarthenshire has been removed. The artwork has been painted over after the ex-BBC presenter pleaded guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. The broadcaster says it is looking into options about retrieving some of his salary after a request from the Culture Secretary. He was one of the BBC's highest-paid stars and received £200,000 between his arrest in November and his resignation in April. 3 US citizens who were freed in a Russian West prisoner swap, the largest since the Cold War. They are back on American soil. Evan Gershkovich was one of 16 prisoners swapped for 8 Russian prisoners in what has, as I said, been described as the biggest exchange in decades between Russia and the West. Gershkovich was detained since March last year on charges of espionage, which he had always denied. Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky's £3.5 billion takeover deal for the owner of Royal Mail has been called in by the UK government under security rules. International Distribution Services, the parent company of Royal Mail, agreed a takeover deal by Mr Kretinsky's group in May. It's understood, though, the Cabinet Office has now launched a review process into the bid under the National Security and Investment Act. The process will assess whether the sale to Mr Kretinsky's, who's already IDS's largest shareholder, could affect the UK's economic infrastructure or pose a security risk. Serial killer Levi Belfield has been blocked from having a civil partnership after a new law came into force stopping the most serious offenders from getting married behind bars. Belfield is serving 2 whole-life orders for killing 13-year-old Millie Dowler, Marsha McDonnell and Amelie Delagrange, as well as the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy. It's understood he recently submitted an application for a civil partnership, which is believed to have spurred the government on to bring in the restrictions. The government minister in charge of sport says she will be speaking with sporting bodies about inclusion and fairness and safety after what she described as an incredibly uncomfortable watch when asked about the Olympic boxing gender row. Italian fighter Angela Carini abandoned her bout against Algeria's Imani Khalif after 46 seconds, saying she'd never felt a punch like it. Khalif is one of 2 fighters present at this year's Games in Paris, having been disqualified from the World Championships last year by the International Boxing Association for failing to meet gender eligibility criteria. But Ms Nandi said the biological facts are far more complicated than is being presented on social media. And Great Britain sits in 3rd place now in the Olympics medals table after GB's Scott Brash, Harry Charles and Ben Murr won gold in the jumping team finals in Paris. Earlier, Great Britain's Bryony Page won gold medal in the women's trampoline at the Olympics too. 33-year-old Bryony won silver in Rio, bronze in Tokyo and now gold in Paris 2024. She's the European champion, the world champion and now the Olympic champion too. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update in just under half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, the honeymoon is officially over. A major headache for our new Prime Minister, with fears of more violence this weekend after the riots following the killings of 3 young girls in Southport on Monday. There have been clashes in towns and cities across England, with more than 100 arrested in London on Wednesday. 3 men alleged to have taken part in violent disorder in Hartlepool on the same day have been remanded in custody, and Merseyside Police has made 7 arrests after protests following the Southport attack. The same police force has said it's aware of online speculation about future protests and has promised it has extensive plans and considerable police resources in place to deal with them. Let's get reaction from GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, the authorities are concerned about possible trouble this weekend. How organised and coordinated might that trouble be?
Well, there are certainly protest venues that are being put on social media sites advertising when and where people should go across various locations in towns and cities across England and Wales over the weekend on both Saturday and Sunday. Multiple dozens of different locations, in fact, that are being advertised. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure how organised the protests are and indeed how many people will turn up. It's perfectly possible that at a number of these locations, nobody will turn up, or just a few people will turn up. But if people turn up in sizable numbers, then that's where, as far as law enforcement are concerned, they have potential issues in hoping or managing to police that properly, depending on the force area, the resources that they've got available to them. And add to that in the mix the fact that there are some counter-protests that are planned as well, at least half a dozen by the organisation Stand Up to Racism. And when you put them in the mix, then that just has the capacity for conflict and to raise the tensions even further. So there's no doubt the police are pretty worried about what the weekend might have in store. Last night, thankfully, there was no disorder or protests of any significance in any locations across the country. But, as I say, they are expecting some significant protests in different areas on Saturday and Sunday.
My thanks to GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Thank you, Mark. Now, the local community in Southport is still in mourning after the appalling killings earlier this week. 6-year-old Bebe King, 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stancombe and 9-year-old Alice da Silva Aguiar were all stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The 17-year-old charged with their murders has been named as Alex Rudikalbana. He appeared at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday and was remanded in custody. Our national reporter Charlie Peters has the latest from Southport. Charlie.
Southport is united in grief today as more people bring forward tributes to the town centre to honour those who were killed in that appalling attack on Monday. 3 children, Elsie Stancombe, BB King and Alice Aguiar, aged just 7, 6 and 9. Earlier today, we saw the family of Alice Aguiar appear here at this tribute towards the victims, where they laid down some flowers and they also put down her age in balloons, just 9. She will be forever 9. And we saw the family expressing extreme emotion as they paid their tributes here for about 30 minutes in a solemn, silent scene as onlookers watched on as they stared on at the flowers and the tributes left for their daughter, for their sister, for their family member at this appalling time. And we also saw them let off some balloons with messages written on them. And that visiting from the family came as so many others have been leaving tributes all day. Leaving tributes as the Assistant Chief Constable to Merseyside Police said that the disorder and the rioting we've seen here in Tuesday night was a disrespect to the victims of that attack on Monday evening. 3 killed and 10 injured in the attack, which has now seen a 17-year-old suspect charged. Tributes have been left here from not only the local community here in Merseyside, but also across the country. We've seen notes from Belfast, from Norwich, and also from towns in Lancashire, such as Preston. People travelling to leave their messages of respect towards those injured and killed in Monday's attack. And it comes as the town reels not only from that vicious incident on Monday morning, but also disorder and rioting on Tuesday. And it comes also as this town prepares for further protests this weekend. It's understood that another protest will occur tomorrow, as at least 15 other protests have been advertised across the country, including Cardiff, where the alleged murderer of those 3 girls is said to have been born. So a solemn and respectful and quiet atmosphere here in Southport, but one also filled with a bit of a fear about what might come next, about the return of disorder to this town, a town that did not need rioting, especially rioting fueled by lies about the suspect, lies about the motive, lies about what happened on Monday. They don't want people coming into this town and causing more disorder that they saw on Tuesday evening, disorder that saw police officers who attended the appalling scene on Monday then having bricks thrown at them on Tuesday evening. What they want is what we've seen today: quiet, peaceful, respectful reflection on those who were killed and injured on Monday's attack.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm joined now by Peter Kirkham, a former Detective Chief Inspector at the Met Police. Peter, how bad could things get this summer?
I mean, there's always potential for things to get very bad indeed. Fingers crossed that that's not going to happen, that those that seem intent on creating disorder and violence see the error of their ways and listen to the majority of people in this country that do not want to see that. No matter what their concerns about immigration or anything else, rioting is not the way to go about getting your voices heard. So hopefully they'll see that it's counterproductive and take a step back from it. But there is always the potential for it.
Most definitely. Peter, how well resourced are cops in 2024 to handle riots like this?
Not as well as they were. In terms of actual numbers, bare numbers of police officers, we're back to somewhere similar to where we were in 2010 before all the cuts took place. However, the police service is still devoid of an awful lot of civilian support staff and PCSOs, and so tasks that they would have done are now being done by police officers. So there's more police officers away from the street than was the case in 2010. And so we haven't got exactly the same numbers on the street as we did have then. But the big thing is that we've got a lot of very new officers. And seeing the footage of some of this disorder, it's becoming apparent that some of the officers that are out there really are suffering from a lack of experience of these sorts of things. If you've not experienced this disorder of this type before, it can be a very overwhelming thing. And you only really know what your reaction is going to be when you face it. And so where you've got whole groups, whole serials of young officers with 2, 3, 4, 5 years service that haven't seen anything like this before, and I suspect many of the units of police involved could be described like that, you're going to have less of a robust response from the police than is necessary to quell these things quickly.
Peter, the country's always had riots. We've had problems in the past. Does this feel different to you culturally? The trouble on the streets, tensions within communities. Is this a new kind of problem facing the police?
Not really. In my experience, we have these sorts of flare-ups for a variety of ostensible reasons every few years. We've had them since the 60s and 70s in Notting Hill, the 80s and 90s in London and Liverpool and Bristol and elsewhere. Around 2000, for a variety of different reasons, around the shooting of Mark Duggan. They come around from time to time. To a certain extent, they're a release of sort of various build-ups of tensions and dissatisfactions within the community. It doesn't feel like it's something different. The motivation is different, but then again, the motivations change all the time. And I'm not actually sure that the motivation actually means very much to many of those involved.
Peter, what percentage of those agitators out there, those protesting, might be from the far right?
I don't know. Some, undoubtedly some. And some people that will be arrested, and we find out who they are further down the line, will turn out to have that sort of background. But what is different at the moment, because of that sort of motivation, the right-wing motivation, is the likes of politicians like Nigel Farage, for instance, non-politicians like Tommy Robinson or whatever name he's using this week, who are playing the people for their own aims and objectives. That's different. And with social media, unfortunately, they have been handed a massive megaphone, which is proving very difficult to control in any meaningful way. And we've got people, and it's been said about Brexit, there were those that knew they were lying about certain aspects, and there are many who were conned by those lies. I think we're seeing the same here. There are those doing the conning, and there are those being conned. It's sad to see that innocent people with no malice, actual malice themselves, are believing some of the nonsense that's being put out. And we need to be very careful and broadcasters need to be very careful about the voices that they are amplifying and making sure that there's justification for the things that are being said. Where things are not right, they shouldn't be being reported by any responsible broadcaster, no matter what their actual sort of political position themselves is.
Well, Peter, of course, Tommy Robinson and indeed Nigel Farage are not here to defend themselves. Clearly, Tommy Robinson, a highly controversial figure, but Nigel Farage, the leader of a brand new political party, voted for by 4.1 million voters. He would argue that he's simply representing the concerns of real people. I've got no doubt he would condemn the violence wholeheartedly. I understand he has. But, Peter, thank you so much for your view and your considered thoughts on this. Former Detective Chief Inspector at the Met Police, Peter Kirkham. A fascinating conversation. Your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Lots more on this huge story at 5 o'clock. Keir Starmer's first major political headache and his first major test. Of course, it's not a good look, is it, for a new government to see disorder on the streets. He will be keen, I should say, to nip it in the bud. Check out more coverage of what's happening around the country on our excellent website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Thank you. Coming up, Tory leader hopeful Robert Jenrick says he's the man to make the Tories great again. More on that with our political correspondent on the ground. We're also going to speak to ex-Tory MP Neil Parish, and we've got a great booking before 5 coming into the studio to talk about the Huw Edwards scandal. Former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale. All of that to come. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, time for the best part of the show, our Greatest Britain, where we share amazing people who do amazing things. And this week, that is Dr. Leo Cheng and the Reverend Hilary Cheng.
Well, Dr. Chen regularly serves as a volunteer surgeon aboard the Mercy ships in West Africa and has recently served his 17th mission aboard the ships. He volunteers with his wife, Reverend Hilary Cheng, a Methodist minister in the UK.
Thank you for joining us, and what a privilege. So just briefly explain, what are Mercy ships?
Well, Mercy ship provide world-class surgery on the ship, and the ship then sail to these poorest of the poor country because there's no infrastructure to get road or rail there. And we offer free surgery and also education, training of medical staff, and partner with the local or the host nation to build up their surgical and anaesthetic services.
So how long have you been travelling West Africa? You go on all these different ships, different ports, and you treat the needy and the vulnerable. How long have you both been doing this?
20 years.
20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And you take the time to do this out of your own holiday from work. Why do you do it?
Well, because I'm indebted to the education in this country with all the qualification I get. And NHS is great. I love the NHS because without NHS, we see cases that we see in the low-income country. And I want to make use of my hand to help those people who have no way of helping themselves. Because the tumours, the deformities, not just a physical ailment, but it's being ostracised and die early, commit suicide because they've been ostracised by their family.
When you're on the ship, you are seeing the very worst that the country can offer. I find it a great privilege to work alongside these people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Let me tell you that the Huw Edwards scandal rumbles on, and with me in the studio in just a few minutes' time is the former Culture Secretary, Sir John Whittingdale. He remains an MP, one of the few surviving Tory MPs. I'll get his verdict on Robert Jenrick's speech, as Jenrick said that he is the man that can make the Tories great again. Now, folks, good news. There's still plenty of time to enjoy a massive win this summer, with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash. Rachel Reeves doesn't get a penny. 30k straight into your back pocket. You really could be our next big winner, and here's how.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner, with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GB News.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby, DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, in the last hour, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has officially launched his campaign to be leader of the Conservative Party. He promised to reform his party and put them in a position where they can win the next general election. His speech happened. It came live from his Newark constituency, where he claimed the Tories lost the election because they broke their promise to bring down immigration, and he said he would absolutely and 100% leave the European Convention on Human Rights if he were to get the keys to number 10. Let's get the thoughts now of former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Neil, are you impressed? Has Robert Jenrick got your vote?
I was very impressed with what Robert had to say. He was sort of confident, he was competent, he did it, he delivered it with no notes, and he very much kept to the script, that he had in his head. I think he gives you that clear. I mean, I wasn't necessarily going to vote for Robert Jenrick, but I must admit, I'm quite tempted now, because I liked his line, we are a broad church, but we need to read from the same creed.
Yes,
and I think that is really, really important. And I just felt that he answered the questions to the journalists well. He didn't shilly-shally around. I noticed that he's got a 3,500 majority, which really in Newark was very good, especially in this last election. So generally speaking, I think, sometimes coming first out down the track in a race is not always the best place to be. But I think he's set the bar pretty high, and I should be very interesting to see how the other contenders do.
Well, yes, I mean, I thought some of his rhetoric was very impressive, a very clear vision for the country and for the party. He wants a small state that works rather than a big state that fails. He wants to end the cycle of broken promises that have happened under the Conservatives. So he seems quite strong on policy: exit the ECHR, stop the boats, reduce legal net migration. But has he got the X factor?
Yeah, that's the interesting one. But I think my view is that what he showed was great competence today. And I think the X factor may not be in abundance, but I think it will come. My view is, as you know, Mark, and we've had this discussion many times, is I think we want somebody who's very able, but is also a pretty safe pair of hands, because this next 4 or 5 years is going to be a difficult time for the Tory party, bringing us together, being a proper opposition, and getting people to sort of look again at the Tories because, you know, they've been so disenchanted with us because we've been so broken. And so I think he has every opportunity of doing that. I mean, I knew him right from the start. Sue and I actually went along with the dog and the rosette when he had his by-election in Newark many moons ago. And I think you'll find he's a good runner. Like I said, I think he's come out of in the race very well. I mean, I'm just impressed. I mean, I said to Sue earlier, you know, it's a pity that America really can't have, you know, the candidates of our quality, really, whether you vote for him or whether you don't. He is competent, he's capable, and he would make a good Prime Minister. So there's other candidates to come yet. I will probably, you know, have to sort of rack my brains by the time I finish as to who I go for. And by the way, Mark, I've just moved the cattle back down to the hams, so they're having nice fresh grass, and they were quite well behaved today. So I just wanted to let you know that as well. All right.
Well, I hope you gave them a good milking this morning. Neil, all these references to your wise wife, Sue, I might ask to interview her next time. Really good to see you, Neil. Good luck with the harvest, and we'll catch up soon. My thanks to former Conservative MP and very busy farmer Neil Parish. Lots more to get through. Live in the studio on the BBC crisis and the Huw Edwards scandal, the former Culture Secretary, Sir John Whittingdale, plus Harry and Meghan back on tour. All of that to come. But first, your news headlines and Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 4:30. The top story from the newsroom. The Prime Minister has returned to Southport today, visiting the town for the second time this week. That's after Monday's knife attack there that killed 3 young girls. Sir Keir Starmer's met with members of the local community, including police officers and health services, according to media reports. He's also paid a visit to Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool, where many of the victims of Monday's attack were and are being treated. The Prime Minister's praised the hospital's staff's professionalism in treating the injured. Well, Southport has seen violent unrest due to false claims about the attacker's identity that was spread on social media, with concerns for further violence in the Liverpool city region over the weekend. And Sir Keir Starmer has condemned hatred on the streets, calling for a national response to the disorder. Meanwhile, police have identified a woman who was one of 8 people seen throwing objects outside a migrant hotel that left 1 police officer injured. Hampshire police said a minority of the 200 people protesting in Aldershot became violent. Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick says he wants to breathe new life into the Conservative Party and help grow the Tories. He's one of 6 candidates hoping to replace Rishi Sunak. The former Home Office ministers claimed the main reason that the Tories lost the general election in July was because they'd failed to deliver on immigration, saying that's why he quit last year. After a vote in September, the winner will be announced in November. 3 US citizens freed in a Russia-West prisoner swap are now back on American soil. Evan Gershkovich was one of 16 prisoners swapped for 8 Russian prisoners in what has been described as the biggest exchange since the end of the Cold War between Russia and the West. Gershkovich was detained since March last year on charges of espionage, which he'd always denied. The Prime Minister led to the tributes to Sir Andy Murray after his tennis career ended in defeat in the quarter-finals of the Olympic men's doubles. 21 years after his first professional match, his last match ended in a straight-sets loss to Americans Taylor Fritz and Tommy Paul, alongside his doubles partner Dan Evans. shortly after the defeat, Sir Andy posted on social media, well, never liked tennis anyway. Sir Keir Starmer took to social media too, saying, "Thanks, Andy, for 2 decades of phenomenal entertainment and sportsmanship. A true British great," he added. Murray bows out from the sport as a double Olympic champion, 3-time Grand Slam winner and former world #1. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. More at 5 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My thanks to Sam Francis for a largely accurate news bulletin. Now, in the last hour, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has officially launched his campaign to be leader of the Conservatives. Let's cross live to GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, did Robert Jenrick set the house on fire?
Well, he said, and welcome here to Newark. That's right. No, the house isn't on fire, but certainly out of a professional campaign launched by Robert Jenrick here in Jenrick country in Newark. I'll say there's 200 activists here. He's trying to show he's the leader of the people, of the members outside of London. And with me now is Esther McVeigh, of course, and she introduced Robert Jenrick in that void of the speech. Esther McVeigh.
Hello.
Why is Robert Jenrick the guy to lead this country after the next election?
Because I think he's got the capacity, the integrity. I think he's got the work ethic, and you know how relentless it is. And I also think he will be good at persuading the country and the members what we need. And that unifying figure, I think, for the right and the left, for traditionalists and liberals, all of those. I think he's the person.
In your remarks, you talked about not being polarising, not picking fights. And I wonder, were you referring to any other candidates in this race?
No, I think the word was he wasn't provocative, he could persuade. And I just think at the moment in the countries, we've seen sort of tensions, you've seen difficulties, and actually what we need, again, was that so you've got to be able to tackle really knotty problems, but you need to do it in a way that you bring people along and not spark conflict. And I was pointing that out, and I really think that is relevant at this moment in time.
Is he a right-winger or a left-winger?
To be fair, I think the key thing for me is traditional. You see, because I think what people are saying, they're trying to pin people down. Oh, and then you'll say far right or this. No, for me, it is the timeless conservative values we need to get back to. So I'd call him traditional, which is what I'd say I am.
In his speech there, he talked about the missed opportunities, the failures on immigration, low taxation. I mean, this is your chance to rebuild. He talked about a mountain to climb. I mean, it's like Everest, and you're in base camp right now, isn't it? Do you think you can reasonably beat Labour, your party, in 2029?
Oh, I absolutely think we can. And I tell you one thing, Labour's got off to a shocking start. And whether that was scrapping the fuel allowance for pensioners, for millions of pensioners, whether that was scrapping the social care reforms. I mean, there's so many things that they've done wrong, I'd say, in the first couple of weeks, and went against what they campaigned on at the general election. There's lots of people at the moment who are absolutely furious. So we Conservatives actually have to take the fight to Labour, the fight to reform, and win all those voters back.
Well, Labour say they found a £20 billion black hole, Esther McVeigh, and they're dealing with it.
Oh, come on, give us a break. That isn't true. They know it isn't true. And most importantly, the public know it isn't true. Because they said about 50 times we won't raise taxes, and now they're going to. And what they're doing is giving things to their pet projects. So they're collapsing to their union paymasters, they're collapsing to other things, and they want to put the money, whether it's net zero, as I said, buckling to the paymasters. And that's where they're putting the money. It is all political decisions. It's not financial ones, and we all know that.
In the question and answer session, he was asked twice, would you back a workable Rwanda scheme? He said yes. Is that right?
Well, that's what he said. That's what he'd hoped to. I think he also said, look, that'll be 4 or however many years away. I think my key point, which Labour have never been able to answer, when people destroy their documentation, when they come over on the boats illegally, and Labour say, we're going to send them back home, where is home? They've destroyed the documents. So you do need a safe third country, and that's why now other countries are looking at Rwanda. Maybe it'll be Rwanda, maybe it'll be another country, but it needs to be a safe third country. Labour's led us down there again. again.
And just finally, you're a former cabinet minister under Rishi Sunak. You were known as a common sense minister. Do you think Keir Starmer's response to the troubles we've seen across the country, of course the violence is always condemned, but he's not going towards looking at why it's happening, why people feel disaffected, should he?
Yes, I think we do need to look at where that disaffections come from, and that goes back to my point about you've got to be able to persuade people, talk to people, have those difficult conversations without provocation, and that's what a true leader needs to do. But look, a bit like everybody said today, first and foremost, we've got to think about those people in Southport who have either lost their children or had them harmed in every which way. So, you know, that's where our first.
Well, Esther McVey, thank you. And there you have it, Esther McVey, a senior figure, a Tory big beast even, dare I say it.
Big? How very dare you?
Introducing Robert Jenrick here in the first of what will be 6 leadership, 3-month leadership contest gets underway.
Fascinating interview there with Esther McVey. My thanks to Chopper, that is, of course, Christopher Hope, our political editor. More reaction to Robert Jenrick's speech in the next hour. Plus, I'll be asking the former Culture Secretary, Sir John Whittingdale. He's coming in to the studio in a couple of minutes' time to talk about the BBC and Huw Edwards, but I'll ask him who he's backing for the leadership of his party. But next up, Harry and Meghan are back. They're planning a world tour. But do we want them representing us here in the UK? I'll get reaction from Britain's most fearless royal biographer, Angela Levin. The knives are out. We'll do that next.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the MH westbound in Glasgow. It's partially blocked due to a broken down vehicle at junction 15 Townhead. Slow for the M61 northbound in Lancashire, just up to junction 30 of the M6. Estimated travel time around 20 minutes. Queues on the M6 southbound in Staffordshire. There's a lane closed for a camper van fire between junction 11 Cannock and 10 for Wolverhampton. Slow traffic on the M56 westbound in Cheshire due to an earlier lorry fire at junction 7 for Bowden. There's queues on the M4 eastbound in Berkshire, 2 lanes closed and the entry slip road is also partially blocked. It's due to an accident at junction 10 Wokingham. And queues on the M25 anti-clockwise in London. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 28, the Brook Street roundabout, and 27 for the M11. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Busy show today. The former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale live in the studio in a couple of minutes on the BBC crisis and Huw Edwards. But first, last week, we brought you the story that Prince Harry won't bring his family to the United Kingdom over safety fears after the government downgraded his police protection. However, the couple are set to visit Colombia now, which is famous for its armed drugs cartels. Both the UK and US governments advise their citizens against all but essential travel to parts of the country. Oh, that's very confusing, isn't it? Let's get reaction now from the royal biographer, a very good friend of mine, Angela Levin. Angela, good to see you again. This is, you have to say, quite typical of the couple. They say one thing and do another. Britain's too dangerous, but Colombia isn't.
Well, yes. I mean, it's just fascinating that the UK Foreign Office has said to people that they mustn't go unless it's absolutely essential, because it is dangerous at the moment, especially in a place called Calais, where they have a list of, that's where one of the things that they're going to go. And the KGB in Calais has got 80% of global cocaine. So, and also they're doing a lot of taking people away and asking for money to give them back. So it is really ridiculous. And it actually conforms with my long-term suggestion that they try to manipulate the king and bring him to, stressfully to help him. And of course, it won't happen, but that's what Harry's trying. I mean, to have 3 court cases on the Home Office when they keep saying the same thing, and he's trying and trying and trying, because that's why he won't bring his wife, that's why he won't bring his children. But really, it's a nonsense, because he would be very looked after with good protection people, but not the very, very top of the tree, which is really just for Camilla, Charles and William and Catherine. There's a distance in the level, and it's not taking our money, our tax money, to pay for it. It comes out of another pocket. So to do this is to hurt him, to hurt the royal people, and to just become very, very nasty. I think it's
Angela, let me interrupt you. I've only got a couple of seconds. I wish we had longer, but let me ask you finally, and you know Prince Harry well, of course, you're his biographer and you spent many months in his company, and you feel that he's changed since he met Meghan. This couple have kept their royal titles, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which means that even if this is a private tour, they're still representing the United Kingdom. I'm not sure how my viewers and listeners feel about that.
Yes, the reason they're going, they say, from Colombia is to raise the country's profile. Well, that means exactly that. They think they're royal and they're going to raise the profile. It's not true. It shouldn't happen. And I think it's a disgrace.
Angela, we'll catch up soon. My thanks to esteemed royal biographer and dropper of royal truth bombs, Angela Levin. Well, the backlash against the BBC after the Huw Edwards scandal continues apace. I'll get reaction next from the former Culture Secretary, Sir John Whittingdale, live in the studio. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new 2-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness, and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like, and he also helps people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, the Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know. And there will be a lot more. And he's been getting the money to do this. And I think he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, the BBC Huw Edwards scandal rumbles on, and the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has said that Huw Edwards should return his BBC salary of almost £500,000 after he admitted accessing indecent images of children. Meanwhile, a mural of Edwards has been removed from where it was located near Llanglechly. And we're going to get reaction now in the studio from the former Culture Secretary, Sir John Whittingdale, MP. Sir John, lovely to have you in the studio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Is this a crisis of the BBC's making?
Well, as ever, it's not the BBC's fault that it turns out that one of its employees behaved in a way which clearly is appalling and shocking to most people. But the way in which it has been handled, I think, has created real problems for the BBC. And the fact that they don't seem to have been, even now, fully transparent about how much was known, what they were told, why they took the decision to go on not just employing Huw Edwards, but paying him a very large amount of money. These are all questions which I think people want to have much more detailed answers to.
Indeed. Do you think that the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has a point that he should return perhaps a year of his wages, almost £500,000?
Well, I think the fact that he was continuing to be paid a huge amount of money, he was one of the best paid people employed by the BBC, and that he continued to be so after the BBC was told that he had been arrested. I entirely understand why Lisa Nandy has said that he should give it back, but I think most people would say he shouldn't have received it in the first place.
Where do the BBC go from here, would you say?
Well, I mean, the BBC have, as ever, conducted an internal inquiry when these allegations against Huw Edwards were first made. We don't know what exactly that concluded. I think they need to be much more open. I think the Director General does need to be held publicly to account. The Culture Secretary has called him in and talked to him, but as I've said before, I rather regret the fact that because of the political cycle, we don't have a select committee at the moment. I chaired the select committee. I called in both Mark Thompson when he was Director General, George Entwistle during the Savile affair, and that was gave us the opportunity to question in public the Director General and to demand answers. Unfortunately, that's not possible at the moment.
Serious allegations around Huw Edwards' conduct emerged just over a year ago, early July. Do you have the impression that figures at the BBC circle the wagons to protect their own in relation to Huw Edwards?
Yes, I mean, I think there was an awful lot of people who clearly knew Huw Edwards well and found it difficult to believe, but there was also a sort of tendency to rubbish the Sun newspaper, to say that this was a gross invasion of somebody's privacy, that they were implying that he committed a criminal act. The Sun did actually say that that wasn't the substance of their story. They didn't say that he was innocent, but he wasn't necessarily breaking the law. And it turns out that actually the charges brought against him don't relate to that particular incident.
Most definitely, although still no denial about those in relation to those original allegations, but of course it pales into insignificance compared to his guilty plea this week in court. What about the reputation of the BBC long term? Could this be harmful? My viewers and listeners have to pay almost £170 a year for the privilege of watching BBC TV. Does it bring the licence fee into disrepute, do you think?
Well, I think there's a different and important argument to be had about the licence fee. I've long been of the view that there will come a time when the licence fee is very difficult to sustain. And the last government actually had set in motion the debate about how the BBC should be funded in the future. Now, that, I think, has nothing to do with Huw Edwards, but it is an important issue.
My deep thanks to former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale, MP. Lots more to come.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M8 westbound in Glasgow due to an earlier broken down vehicle at junction 15 Townhead. Slow for the M1 southbound in West Yorkshire. A vehicle has shed its load on the carriageway at junction 40 for Ossett. Slow traffic on the M1 northbound in Leicestershire. There's a lane closed and the entry slip road is partially blocked due to a broken down vehicle at junction 24, the East Midlands Airport. Queues on the M4 eastbound in Berkshire. The entry slip road is partially blocked due to an accident at junction 10 Wokingham. We're also seeing slow traffic in Hertfordshire, firstly on the M1 northbound due to a broken down vehicle between junction 9 Redburn and junction 10 the Luton Airport Spur Road. And also in Hertfordshire on the M25 clockwise is queues. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle at junction 25 Enfield. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, this is Mark Dolan in for Martin Daubney. A very busy hour to come. Can our brand new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, keep law and order on the streets in what is predicted to be a summer of political violence? We'll be analysing how the PM tackles his first major challenge in office. Also in this hour, Robert Jenrick has kicked off his bid for the leadership of the Tory party. How would he make the Tories great again and face down the threat of Nigel Farage's Reform UK? The Olympics boxing gender row rages on. Is it too much to ask for women to be safe in the ring? We'll get more on a growing Olympics crisis that won't go away. And what about this for a story? As temperatures are expected to soar this August, do Brits need to start thinking about installing air conditioning at home? In a world of global warming, will aircon be the new central heating in the years ahead? I'll be asking legendary TV weatherman John Ketley. All of that in the next hour. John Ketley, you're not going to miss that, are you? Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. gbnews.com/your say. Apologies, it's been a very busy 2 hours, but I'll get to your feedback shortly. Lots to get through, a packed hour, a crisis for the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Will he measure up? We'll find out after the headlines. And Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much. It's 1 minute past 5. The top story this evening. The Prime Minister has returned to Southport today, visiting the town for the second time this week after Monday's knife attack there that killed 3 young girls. Sir Keir Starmer's met with members of the local community, police officers and health services, according to local reports. He's also paid a visit to Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool, where many of the victims of Monday's attack were treated. The Prime Minister's praised the hospital staff's professionalism in treating the injured. Southport has now seen violent unrest due to claims about the attacker's identity that was spread on social media, with concerns of further violence in the Liverpool City region. And Sir Keir Starmer has condemned hatred on the streets. He's calling for a national response to the disorder. Meanwhile, police have identified a woman who was one of 8 people seen throwing objects outside a migrant hotel that left 1 police officer injured. Hampshire police said a minority of the 200 people protesting in Aldershot became violent. And as we heard from Mark at the top of the hour, Robert Jenrick has claimed the Conservatives lost the election because of a broken promise on immigration. The former immigration minister was speaking at the launch of his campaign to become leader and succeed Rishi Sunak. Mr Jenrick also claimed the British political system has appeared either unwilling or unable to secure the UK's borders.
Broke our promise to the British public to deliver controlled and reduced migration and the secure border that the public rightly demand. We allowed the cycle of broken promises to continue. And as a minister, when I concluded that I couldn't secure any more changes to our legal migration system, I resigned from Cabinet last year.
In other news, 3 US citizens freed in the biggest prisoner swap between Russia and the West in decades are now back on American soil. Evan Gershkovich was one of 16 prisoners released in exchange for 8 Russian prisoners. He was detained in Russia since last March on charges of espionage, though he had denied those charges. Among those let out in return include an assassin serving life in Germany. Here, meanwhile, a mural of the former newsreader Huw Edwards in his home village of Carmarthenshire has been removed. That artwork has now been painted over after the ex-BBC presenter pleaded guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. The broadcaster says it's looking into options about retrieving some of Huw Edwards' salary after a request was made by the Culture Secretary. He was one of the BBC's highest paid stars and received £200,000 between his arrest in November and his resignation in April this year. And as we've just been talking about, I'm going to scroll past this story because we have just touched on that Evan Gershkovich has been released from prison. But turning to Olympics, Great Britain are having a successful day at the Paris Games with further medal hopes tonight. Gold in rowing, in equestrian and trampolining has taken Team GB up to a 3rd spot in the medal table. BMX rider Bethany Shriever and swimmers Ben Proud, Duncan Scott and Tom Dean are all hopefuls for Britain tonight. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Much more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
And considerable police resources in place to deal with them. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, how serious is the threat this weekend?
Well, there's clearly a lot of concern because there are multiple protests that are being planned in towns and cities across the country, and in addition to that, there will be counter-protests at least 8 different locations across the country as well. So that every time you have counter-protests, and on this occasion it's Stand Up to Racism that are going to launch these counter-protests, there's then the potential for rival groups to clash, for tensions to rise even further, and that will of course be of a great concern to the police. They don't know, to be honest, how many people will attend these protests. There are dozens that it seems are being advertised across social media. Now, it might be that no one shows up at some of them, that maybe only a few people show up, or indeed with some of them there could be very significant numbers. And the police have to try and gauge themselves with as much information gathering as possible which protests to put their resources in significant numbers at. So it is a bit of a clearly a difficult weekend potentially as far as law and order elements are concerned this weekend, the forces across the country. That's why we saw that meeting in Downing Street yesterday, coming up with a plan of action, a better intelligence gathering and indeed more sharing of resources. They do have that already, to be honest, called mutual aid, where they can call in assistance from neighbouring forces pretty quickly.
Indeed, and of course, police have a difficult job, don't they? They've got to identify people who are genuinely protesting, which is their right, and those agitating, potentially from the far right, as referenced by the Prime Minister.
Yes, I mean, listen, there's no doubt that there have been far-right elements involved here. Quite at what level, we don't know. The Prime Minister was clear in his news conference yesterday, saying that there were no protests that took place, no legitimate protests, that this was orchestrated far-right violence. Well, a lot of the people, and we know this because we were there after the rioting that broke out in Southport and spoke to local people that were there, that there were significant numbers of local people that were there, many of them because they were concerned about the issues that they see a disintegration of the social fabric in their communities. And again, if you look today, for instance, at those that are being charged in relation to the disorder in Hartlepool, well, 3 of them have been charged, appeared in court and remanded in custody. They were all from the Hartlepool area. Again, a man has been charged in connection with disorder outside a migrant hotel in Manchester. He was from the Manchester area. So I think it is more complex than just to come out with this catch-all. It's the far right that's organising it. It's clear there are many local people that are going along either to see what's happening, they're very concerned about these issues that we've just mentioned there. Either way, it is not just far-right people moving around from different parts of the country, as is demonstrably the case from these court cases that we've been hearing about today.
Well, indeed, this is a new government, Mark, and it wants to be judged favourably and get off to a strong and secure start. Any government will be judged on their ability to keep law and order on the streets. So this is politically significant for the Prime Minister as well as a security matter, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's why, of course, he called these senior policing and law enforcement and also criminal justice figures into Downing Street for this meeting yesterday, and then after that held that news conference. He wants to show that he's getting a grip of this crisis before it really becomes a very deep and sustained crisis, and it will be the hope of him and law enforcement that this weekend passes without notable incident. Incidentally, of course, he has been up in Southport again today for the second time in a week. He has been meeting members of the policing service, other emergency services. He has gone to Alderhay Hospital, where a number of those children who were stabbed are being treated, to thank the medical staff at Alderhay as well. And we're told he's met people from the community, quite who from the community, we're not sure. It'd be interesting to find out, or whether it is this community leaders that doesn't necessarily reflect many people actually in the those housing estates, those areas where they are very concerned about the issues we've discussed.
Most definitely. Mark, will catch up later. My thanks to GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Let's get the views now of former Scotland Yard detective, a man who's been there and has certainly got the T-shirt, Peter Bleksley. Peter, is the threat of the far right being overplayed by some politicians, do you think, in regard to law and order in this country?
The expression far right is now being used very lazily, I might hasten to add, and often very inaccurately to describe anybody who harbours concerns about perhaps the rise of Islam, or who is deeply concerned about unfettered migration into our country from people on small boats who we simply don't know who they are and where they've come from. Now that label is pinned on anyone. And what it is an assault on free speech, so that if people were to be heard in public having such a conversation and expressing their concerns, they might be frowned upon, and that conversation would be ended. It's inaccurate, it's lazy, and it doesn't apply to millions of decent, law-abiding, concerned British citizens.
Well, I think you raise a good point. I mean, 4.1 million people voted for Reform UK, and one of the key flagship policies was about reducing legal net migration to a sensible, manageable level. Well, that's the words of Nigel Farage, not me, and, of course, to stop the boats. But it's also clear, isn't it, Peter, that some people got on buses and trains and travelled to Southport to make trouble.
Yes, some people did. And if anybody wants to throw a brick at police officers, I'll be polite, you're an idiot. Likewise, if you want to set fire to a police vehicle, none of that should be happening, and I don't condone any of it in any way, shape or form. And if people who go to take part in such idiocy are met with a robust reaction from the police service, then so be it. They brought it upon themselves. But let's remember, much of this disquiet that sprung forth in Southport was because a mischievous player put it out onto the internet that completely false information about the person believed to be connected in this attack. False information about their name, where they come from, how they got into the UK. Entirely false. Did we have a senior police officer instantaneously going to the media and calling it out for what it was, something completely fake by a mischievous actor who wanted to stir up hatred? No, we didn't. They were silent. And this is the kind of numbskull, over-intellectualised police leadership who do not have the intellectual dexterity to recognise these things, call them out, and keep the streets more peaceful.
How chaotic do you think things could get this summer, Peter?
Well, I was very glad that I woke up this morning to no bad news. There are, of course, now meetings scheduled for this evening, tomorrow and Sunday. Please, everybody, let's just behave. Go onto the streets, protest, express your disquiet, make your feelings well and truly known to everybody. And then what we can hope is that the media reports that accurately, politicians don't spin lies, and frustrated people's voices are heard like they should be in a flagship democracy.
And Peter, briefly, if you can, do the police stand guilty of a two-tiered approach to keeping law and order? We saw absolute carnage in Leeds a couple of weeks ago, a cop car overturned, a bus set on fire, and yet a far more fulsome response in Southport this week. So are double standards at play, and is a dualistic approach happening when it comes to the police?
And an incredibly robust reaction by the Metropolitan Police this week in Whitehall, when the man who would normally be presenting this show found himself being arrested.
Martin Daubney, yeah.
So this is exactly why the expression two-tier policing has become sealed into the lexicon of British language when it comes to policing. But of course, public order policing is complicated. There are challenges, and it would take me an age to explain many of them. But the public perception is, in Leeds, the police run away from brown-faced people. In London, they slam white-faced people into the pavement and the road. And that, of course, causes disquiet because it's inconsistent and people are going, what's really going on here?
Can you really make that distinction based on skin colour? I mean, it was a diverse group in Leeds. It wasn't only people of black and minority ethnic background. There were white people involved in the trouble as well. Is it really about skin colour, Peter?
That's how some people perceive it, and that's exactly what I said. That's when people perceive it that way. So they talk about two-tier policing. It seems to be inconsistent, and therefore this accusation is made. Now, in Leeds, for example, the police there foolishly didn't feel they had sufficient intelligence to be able to get their officers wearing the right public order kit. In London, they felt they did have the intelligence, so they were there in full kit, crash helmets, the lot, and were very robust with an awful lot of people. Over 100 arrests made. But it seems to be one rule for some and another rule for others. And until we get consistent policing, consistent messages from senior police and politicians, when they stop lazily labelling millions of people as something that they fundamentally are not, this disquiet is going to rumble on, and who knows where it's going to end.
Sobering stuff. What a fascinating conversation. Peter, thank you for your time. Peter Blexley is a former Scotland Yard detective, and he's not pulling his punches quite clearly. You can get lots more on this developing story. Is Labour, our brand new Labour government, about to be dealing with a summer of political violence and chaos? Find out on our excellent website, gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news website in the country, thanks to you. Coming up is Robert Jenrick, cut out to be the next Tory leader. And how does he see off the threat of Nigel Farage and Reform UK? That's next.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets at my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
We're joined now by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, who is outside Buckingham Palace for us.
Well, let's start with the expenditure, shall we? From the last year, it was £89.1 million. That's what the royal household spent. And one of the core parts of that expenditure was, of course, their big event last May, the coronation. £800,000 went into that. And then we should look at the engagements. You mentioned the number that King Charles made last year. Well, £4.2 million on those engagements, much of that travel. And then finally, how much that costs us all? Well, it's £1.29 per person. That's the cost of the monarchy to the taxpayer. But that really hides the truth of how that cash comes about, because all of the money that the royal household spends is actually theirs being given back to them by the Treasury. It comes from the Crown Estate surplus. That's a £16 billion portfolio they have, and their sovereign grant is made up of the surplus from 2 years prior. So in the year to 2022, there was about £350 million knocking around from the surplus. That was given all to the Treasury, and they were given back 15% as their core sovereign grant. Additional 10% was given towards the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. That's been going on since Parliament voted on it in 2017. It's expected to take 10 years. But all in all, that's been about £86.3 million. And as you heard, the expenditure was £89 million. So how do they mix that gap? How do they close that gap in and cost out? Well, they make their own money as well from additional sources of income. And that was the gates, the receipt to Windsor Castle and their many palaces across the country, where people have paid about £10 million to visit in the last year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Olympic gender boxing row rages on. We'll get reaction shortly from a top sporting insider. Also in this hour, I'll be telling you how there's a growing demand for aircon units in the UK with global warming. Is aircon going to become the new central heating? Are you going to need it this weekend? I'll be asking TV weatherman John Ketley. But first, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has laid out his stall to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, promising to reform his party and put them in a position where they can win the next general election. The MP for Newark claims that the Tories lost the election because they broke their promise to bring down immigration, and says he would absolutely leave the European Convention on Human Rights if he were ever to get his hands on the keys to number 10. Well, let's go live now to Robert Jenrick's Newark constituency and GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, how did that speech go down?
Well, quite well, I think, Mark, here in Newark, in this YMCA centre. Around 200 activists heard him speak. Obviously, there is local membership base here, but I think it showed some ambition to get outside of the London bubble and try and address to where the actual voters are and if GB News viewers are. He talked about how he felt the party's got a mountain to climb. It's a mountain called Mount Everest, in my view, and his party is at base camp. But he is tipped to be one of the final two to face the membership in the back end of October, I think. There are 6 candidates at the moment: Kemi Badenoch, Dame Priti Patel, Mel Stride, Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly and Mr Jenrick himself. And I do think that it's likely to be someone like Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick possibly, maybe Tom Tugendhat might get there. But I think that's where the kind of base of the party is broadly left or centre ground at the moment compared to being a right-wing party in last Parliament. And that does mean they might try and push out some of the right-wing candidates, which could cause a problem, I think, with the base of the party, which is quite much more right-wing. So that kind of schism is a problem. But we heard it from Robert Jenrick. He said he would like to bring back maybe the Rwanda plan that's workable if he becomes Prime Minister after the next election. He would look to lead the European Convention on Human Rights. He says the party's got to stop promising and delivering on notably net migration, a huge failure there, and also on taxation. So I think he's trying to find a way here to rebuild the party's confidence after the disastrous election last month.
Chopper, thank you so much for that assessment. With me in the studio now is former Labour advisor Stella Santakidou. Stella, lovely to see you again. Which of the candidates do Labour fear the most? You've got Priti Patel, you've got Robert Jenrick, you've got James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch. Who are you worried about?
Let's get this out of the way. No one, but I do have a soft spot for Jenrick, because when I used to work for a homelessness charity, he was housing minister. And he was actually pretty decent as a housing minister in many ways. And I think that he is the one who is the most likely to be popular with the people who are the most likely to be the future of the Conservative Party. So millennials who are professionals, who are working very hard, who want to buy their own home, who are very frustrated with the economic situation in the country. And I think that in his speech today, apart from the fact that he gave out free ice cream to the journalists who were attending,
that always works,
which shows you that he's cut out to be leader.
Was he fab? There you go. I'm here all week. Thank you very much. Or was he more Mr. Whippy?
Yeah. I'm really sorry, I'm from Greece, we don't have these ice creams.
Oh, listen, you haven't lived. But anyway, so you tried to do a charm offensive on the press.
Exactly. So, and what I think is very interesting is that unlike James Cleverly and Priti Patel, who are seen as the other more kind of right-wing people, I guess, obviously Mel Stride and Tom Tugendhat are seen as the most left-wing.
Yeah.
And Robert Jenrick, he used to be considered a Cameron, a centrist person, but he said he's been on a journey since his time in the Home Office because that really radicalised him. And of course, he used to be really close with Suella Braverman, who thinks he's quite left-wing, but they were working very closely when he was in the Home Office. So what I find interesting about what he said today is that unlike James Cleverly and Priti Patel, he is not shying away from saying that we need to be more robust with the planning reforms and we need to build houses. Obviously, with immigration, all of them agree immigration needs to come down. He said that he repeated the fact that he wants to leave the ECHR if he is leader, that he's open to leaving ECHR if he is leader. So I think that he's ticking all of the boxes.
Most definitely. Do you believe politicians when they say they've been on a journey, or does it tell you that they've got no principle?
I believe politicians when they say they've been on a journey because it can happen. With Robert Jenrick...
Prime Minister, for example.
Prime Minister, for example. Or that they're not super ideological, right? And this is a perfectly acceptable way to be. Most people are not particularly ideological. But I think that for Jenrick, when in December 2023, when he resigned as immigration minister from Rishi Sunak's government, I was very, very suspicious. Because I thought this is a man who is seeing the government go down.
Yeah.
And what he's doing is he's jumping before he is pushed. And he has his eyes to the future. He knows that he will want to run as leader at some point. He knows where the voter base is at. He knows what they are frustrated about. And this is why, of course, today he said to answer one of the journalist's questions, he said that he would bring back the Rwanda scheme.
OK, briefly, a couple of seconds. There is surely somebody that Labour fear even more than Robert Jenrick, and it's Kemi Badenoch, because she's a young woman. She's a woman of colour. She will absolutely destroy Labour's efforts at identity politics.
No, because the kind of person who votes for a leader because she's a young woman and woman of colour is not the same kind of person who votes for a very right-wing Conservative party that wants to...
But if the Tories want to stop the boats and reduce immigration, they can't call the party racist if the leader is Kemi Badenoch, can they?
Watch me. Watch me.
You'll try. Stella, great to see you again. Former Labour advisor Stella Santakidou. And listen, I've been practising her name all morning, let me tell you. There is still plenty of time to enjoy a massive win this summer with your chance to win £30,000 tax-free in cash. Yes, you really could be our next big winner, and here's how.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock. Really, really busy show today. It is a great British hat-trick as Team GB claimed 3 gold medals in the Olympics today. Fantastic news. But the boxing gender row rages on. I shall fill you in shortly. And it's getting hot. Some people are going to be needing aircon in their homes in the years ahead. Is aircon going to become the new central heating because of global warming? I'll be asking TV weatherman, the wonderful John Ketley. I've got to say now, it is a sign of a wealthy household. If you go into someone's home and they've got aircon, then they are living the dream. Let me tell you that round at ours, we're still sweltering in the heat. All we've got is an open window. OK, lots to get through. John Ketley on the weather, plus the boxing row. But first, the news headlines and the brilliant Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 5:30. The top story this evening. The Prime Minister has returned to Southport, visiting the town for now the second time this week. That's after Monday's knife attack there that killed 3 young girls. Sir Keir Starmer's met with members of the local community and police officers and health services. That's according to local reports. He also paid a visit to Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool, where many of the victims of Monday's attack have been being treated. The Prime Minister's praised the hospital staff's professionalism in treating the injured. Southport has seen violent unrest due to false claims about the attacker's identity that was spread on social media, with concerns of further violence in the Liverpool City region this weekend. And Sir Keir Starmer's condemned hatred on the streets. He's calling now for a national response to the disorder. Robert Jenrick claims the Conservatives lost the election in July because of a broken promise on immigration. The former minister was speaking at the launch of his campaign to become leader of the party and succeed Rishi Sunak. Mr Jenrick also claimed the British political system has appeared either unwilling or unable, he says, to secure the UK's borders. A mural of former newsreader Huw Edwards in his home village of Carmarthenshire has been removed. The artwork has been painted over after the ex-BBC presenter pleaded guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. The broadcaster says it's now looking at options about retrieving some of Mr Edwards' salary after a request from the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy. He was one of their highest paid stars and received £200,000 between his arrest in November and his resignation in April this year. Well, we've heard tonight that 96 migrants are suing the UK government, claiming they were badly treated at the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. Their lawyers claim the group were unlawfully detained between September and November of 2022. Allegations also include lack of access to hygiene products, forced removal of hijabs and inadequate conditions for children and pregnant women. The High Court's granted the 96 asylum seekers anonymity, claiming they could be at risk if they were identified. The Home Office hasn't yet filed its defence. Proceedings are paused until October. And Great Britain are having a successful day at the Paris Games with further medal hopes in store tonight. Golds in rowing, equestrian and trampolining's taken Team GB up to 3rd in the medal table. BMX rider Bethany Shriever and swimmers Ben Proud, Duncan Scott and Tom Dean are all among the British hopefuls tonight. The very best of luck to those 4. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update just after 6 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. As always, the message board is open, gbnews.com/your say. Lots to get through. Now, as the UK experiences hotter temperatures, a new survey reveals a growing demand for homes with air conditioning. Estate agents report that properties with built-in cooling systems are becoming ever more popular. Why? Is it coming to your home soon? Is aircon going to be the new central heating? I'll be asking TV weatherman John Ketley next.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the cloud, the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays up in South Lanarkshire do continue on the M74 northbound. A lane is closed from junction 6 to 5 heading away from Hamilton to the Rafe interchange at the Bellshill bypass, where a car's broken down in the inside lane. On the M42 in Warwickshire, one lane's blocked southbound where it meets the M6 at the scene of a breakdown, and it's really slow on the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25. A car's broken down in the inside lane clockwise at the A10 just before the Homesdale Tunnel, causing queues. Slow on the Surrey stretch further round, anti-clockwise after a car broke down in the roadworks just after 6 at Godstone. In South London at West Norwood, the A215 Knights Hill blocked by collision. In North London at North Finchley, the high road's blocked southbound off Woodhouse Road by collision. And on the M5, really slow southbound through Somerset, heading towards Clevedon from the M4 due to holiday traffic. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Bit of housekeeping before we press on. I'm having quite a busy 24 hours, which is the greatest thrill because I get to broadcast to you on GB News, on the radio and on TV. And I'm back looking after Patrick's show from 9 till 11 this evening. And I've got a brand new co-star in the morning because Tatiana Sanchez and myself will be on air from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m, as well as 9 till 11 tomorrow, so God knows what's going to keep me going. Your emails, I think, they're coming in thick and fast. gbnews.com/your say. I spoke earlier to retired detective Peter Bleksley, who said it's wrong for the Prime Minister to label all protesters as far right. Kathy says Peter Bleksley is spot on again. The voice of common sense with his finger on the pulse. Kathy, who is a GB News member, goes on to say that man should be in charge of British policing policy. Meanwhile, Rebecca, who's also a GB News member, hello Rebecca, how are you? Thank you for your message, says Peter, the retired cop, talks sense. 20 years a cop, 10 years a criminal lawyer. People are right to be frightened and concerned. It is an inconsistent approach. Jack Toff is also a GB News member who says counter-protests, brackets, invariably left-wing fascists, should be banned. The only reason to counter-protest is to agitate and stop others having their right to protest. Gil has made quite a good point as well, another GB News member, who says, I think that bussing in pensioners to sit down en masse outside Downing Street knitting would make it harder for them to be called far right. Peter speaks for me, says Catherine. Well done, sir. This from Nick, by the way, in terms of how you control riots and any violence that ensues. Nick says, I just don't understand why we don't have water cannons for the riots happening. The tree-hugging lefties claim that protesters could be hurt. What about our brave police officers? How about giving them protection? And as a sideline, put out vehicles that have been torched and get those that cause the damage, that litter the street afterwards, to pay for cleaning. Nick, what a wise man you are. If only you were Home Secretary. Let me tell you that I do think that the Prime Minister is right to say that some people got on trains and on buses to Southport to create trouble. There are extremists who will hijack these occasions for their own ends. And of course, that is very bad news. What I will also say, though, is that there are millions of people in this country, plenty of whom are watching this programme right now and listening to it on the radio, who feel the legal net migration is far too high, that it's unsustainable, over 700,000 last year, putting big pressure on the NHS, on school places, on our infrastructure, and having an economic impact too. And almost everybody that I talk to is furious about the illegal boat crossings. We don't know who these people are. They often throw their documentation and phones into the sea. Sometimes when they arrive in the country, they run for the hills. If you think that's acceptable, then I can't help you. So people are right to be worried about all of these issues, and to lump them in with far-right extremists is, I think, an act of political dishonesty by the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. I think it's disingenuous. I think it's giving him political cover and avoiding the really important question, which is that our society is fractured. You've got parallel communities with people speaking another language, not integrating, not participating in British life, not signing up to British values, and sometimes ignoring the rule of law. We've seen that with those weekly so-called peace marches in which anti-Semitic slogans are waved around and even projected onto the House of Commons. Doesn't sound very civilised to me. But look, it's all about opinions. What is yours? gbnews.com/your say. Next up, I'll be talking all things Olympics as the gender boxing row rumbles on. Is it too much to ask for women, actual, real women, to be safe in the ring? We'll discuss that next.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
An employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant. But I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice. Why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things. And if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable. That's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
We don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not. And as far as I can see, this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous.
Realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Mark Dolan sitting in for Martin Daubney. It's really been fun today. Thank you so much for your company, listening on the radio and watching on TV. It's been a fabulous Friday for the Brits in Paris, with 3 gold medals added to Team GB's tally. It was victory for trampolinist Bryony Page, our jumping team, and Emily Craig alongside her double sculls partner Imogen Gran in the rowing. But this was all overshadowed by a gender row in the Olympic boxing. Let's cross now to sports broadcaster Chris Scudder. And Chris, let's start with the positive news. A great day for Team GB.
Yeah, best of the game so far, Mark. You know, it's 25 medals now, which is a record for Team GB, who have been so fantastic over recent games. And really, they were third at one stage. They overtook the host nation, France, at one stage. France had just won a gold in the judo, so they've just edged back in front, but both nations have got 9 medals. But looking great. There's lots more golds and more medals to come for the Brits. But you say, yeah, three golds today. The first one was really emotional. Emily Craig and Imogen Grant in the women's lightweight double scull. I've seen a lot of rowers and great emotional celebrations, but I think today was the most emotional I've ever seen anybody. Imogen Grant just could not stop crying after they won their race, and they won it so easily as well. This is an event that's going to be scrapped after these games, so I don't know what they'll do afterwards, but a fantastic gold medal, and the rowers are delivering once again. Then it was Bryony Page, who's already won a silver and a bronze in the trampolining, and she topped it today at the age of 33. How about that? 33 years old, winning a gold, beating the Chinese as well, who don't lose many of these type of events. And she's a world champion as well. Fantastic gold medal. And then an unexpected one in the show jumping with Ben Mayer, Harry Charles and Scott Braish all combining to win the show jumping and beat the French, who have been beaten a few times in the equestrian competition by the Brits. So it's been a fantastic day. There's been some silvers and bronzes as well today, and Britain looking as good as they ever have really in the Olympic Games. And it's going to be we haven't even got to the track and field yet, which is going to be good, I think, as well.
Well, definitely. Of course, Chris, I don't want to tempt fate or jinx it, but could this shape up to be a vintage Olympics for Team GB?
Yeah, well, they finished 4th, 3rd and 2nd the last 3 games. The target was between 50 and 70 medals. They're certainly on course for that. I think that what they'd really love is to beat France in their own backyard. We know that China and the USA will be the top 2 nations. Britain can certainly come 3rd. It's nip and tuck with the French at the moment. But we should bear in mind that, you know, France, their Olympic record is not fantastic. This is their first games for 100 years. But the last time they finished in the top 5 medalists was back in 1948. So nowhere near the Brits in terms of success. So it'd be really nice to beat them in their own backyard. And that's certainly not out of the question at this stage. Because the hosts always do well. They always
Well, it's so nice that we can celebrate the success for Team GB, and yes, let's hope they edge it over France this year. But it hasn't all been good headlines, has it? And the boxing gender row rages on. What's the latest?
Well, basically, Imani Khalif, we haven't got any further than we did yesterday. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The uproar, the outrage, really. I think it's taken an emotional reaction from one of her opponents to have lit the blue touch paper, really, when she just said, I'm not going to fight against what she considered a biological male after less than a minute. Social media just erupted, and there's Khalif, who listen, we've been looking into this all day, and she was born a woman, we understand, was raised as a woman, but it's just a question of whether she is a biological male. Nobody can really answer that question. It's based on the International Boxing Association, who say that she has the XY chromosome, which is male, which would give her an advantage. The IOC don't agree with that. There was a test made when she was thrown out of the World Championships last year, but nobody can really verify that. That's what it all hinges on. So it's all a bit of hearsay at the moment. And I think people are basing their assumptions on the fact that, you know, she's allegedly failed this test, and also that she looks like a male. That's where we're at the moment. But if you dive a bit deeper, she has been fighting for a while, and she has lost 9 times to women boxers. So, you know, people are saying, those who are defending her, saying that, you know, well, where were you when she lost in the last Olympics to an Irish girl, Kelly Harrington? So that's where we are at the moment. It's just bouncing around. And behind all this, we've also got a political squabble between the IOC, who have decided to take the reins on boxing's regulation for the Olympics, and the now discredited International Boxing Association, who the IOC said, you're not doing this anymore because we think you're corrupt effectively. So, you know, one is saying that she's biologically male, the other are saying she's not. Where are we with this? We need to establish it. One thing is interesting, Mark, though, is that a lot of former athletes, Nicola Adams, who won gold for Britain, she has come out very much against this. But I think a lot of people are basing it on the fact that she is XY chromosome, which would be a male. But we don't know that for sure. That's the problem. So, I mean, listen, let's assume she's XY. There's a little bit of male in there. I don't know how you say this, really, and, you know, to be correct about it. But if there is, it isn't fair, I don't think. What do you do? Have a separate category? Do you, Seb Coe with the Caster Semenya, it's understood she's not intersex. So Semenya is, and Seb Coe said, right, reduce the testosterone levels. If you don't do that, you can't compete. So we're not quite there yet, but you can see where it's going, can't you? If there's an advantage, is it fair? I think most people would say no, but we need to know, what is her genetic makeup? Is it a genetic disorder? You know, and the mud being slung on social media at the moment.
Most definitely.
Extraordinary.
Well, I think there needs to be empathy on both sides, and I think that the priority, as you've mentioned in your very balanced answer, is fairness, but also, of course, safety as well. Chris Scudder, what a treat to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. Look forward to our next Olympic update from you. Thank you so much to Matthew, Stephen, Q, Maria and the team. It's been a really busy show. I'm back from 9 till 11 tonight, looking after Patrick's show. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the rest of today and into the weekend, there will be some fine sunny weather around, but it's going to turn fresher, and there will be some wet weather arriving because of a frontal system that's already starting to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland and has brought some heavy bursts of rain here. It's going to continue to push its way southeastwards as we go through this evening and overnight. So the rain does break up, but it will push into parts of England and Wales overnight, clinging on to some clear skies across the far southeast and clear skies following across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And as a result, with some fresher air here, temperatures could drop quite low single figures perhaps in rural spots. Elsewhere, a bit of a milder night because of the cloud and the rain that's pushing its way in. There could be some heavy bursts in the rain as we go through tomorrow morning across parts of central southern England and Wales and towards the southeast, so just watch out for that. Otherwise, it's quite a cloudy story across many parts of England and Wales, but a brighter, sunnier start to the day across northern western parts, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That being said, there will be a few showers around for western parts of Scotland, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the day itself then, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain across southeastern England, and there could be some pulses of heavy rain affecting some southern counties at times too, but generally all of that wet weather should clear away towards the east. More showers to come across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between though, a lot of bright and fine weather. That being said, temperatures not as high as they have been recently, still getting into the mid-20s for some of us, mid to high teens further north. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer weather towards the south, and so it could be a bit of a chilly, fresh night for some of us as we go into Sunday morning. And then Sunday does bring some wet weather arriving from the northwest, and that's going to gradually push its way southeastwards next week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good evening. My name is Johnny Ratner. Long queues continue heading north up the M5 through Worcestershire. The motorway's down to a single lane. Everyone's been funneled into the outside lane on that 3-lane stretch just after junction 8, where it meets the M50 at the scene of an accident. And long delays on the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 heading clockwise. The two inside lanes of 4 shut at junction 25 at the A10, where a lorry's broken down. Queues in patches start before 23 at the A1M. In South London at West Norwood, the A215 remains closed along Knight's Hill at the scene of an accident just off Chapel Road. And in North London, the high road at North Finchley blocked southbound by a collision. In Power, south of Welshpool, the A483, that remains shut in Garth Mill and Berry-Ewe, that's at the scene of an accident, causing long queues on local routes as you divert. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in